Okay, 16 Smart Road, Buffalo City Metropolitan Municipality. Time check now, it is exactly 5 minutes after 2. And of course, sinaye Professor Siphiwo Mahala online to talk about the legendary Professor Peter Mtuze. Welcome to KNR Current Affairs, Prof.
Thank you, Tabane. This is my debut interview on Keith Casey Radio.
Oh, yes, you're welcome. You're welcome, Prof. Today we honor the life and the legacy of one of South Africa's literary pioneers, Professor Peter Mtuze, a revered author, translator, academic, and cultural preserver who dedicated his life to isiXhosa literature and African knowledge systems. To reflect on his impact, we are joined now by someone whose own literary journey was greatly shaped by Mtuze's work, Professor Siphiwo Mahala, an accomplished writer, literary scholar himself, and cultural critic in his own right. Professor Mahala has often credited Mtuze as one of his earliest inspirations. Prof, sizivile indaba zokuwa kumthi omkhulu endingavuyayo ke into yokubana sinokuthi reflect just a bit, usichazele nje zisuka into yokubana what personal memory do you recall referring to the first time you read something by Professor Peter Mtuze?
Well, I think the first thing I should send my condolences to the family kaba Mtuze, Omadiba. Abalekela bodwa silahlekelwe sisizwe soMzantsi Afrika nabathandi boncwadi lwesiXhosa. Well, I've known Professor Mtuze for a very long time. I knew about him before I got to know him. I can give you the background, but what strikes me the most about him, or one incident that has remained with me, is the time I was assigned the responsibility to peer review his upcoming novel. It was given to me because it's from Mtuze, and so my responsibility really was to tell them that is good. I think that's what the expectation. But having followed Professor Mtuze's work for a long time, I felt he had not done enough. I critiqued, from the title, the characters, the plot, everything that I thought was not good enough. And surprisingly, Professor Mtuze took that very well. He, even though my criticism was brutal, he took heed of my advice where I suggested that he change things. And then they sent the manuscript back to me. And when I looked at it, I felt like, he was showing off, essentially. He addressed my concerns and surpassed everything that I had suggested. And that manuscript resulted in what years later will be published as Ingada Zibuyile Endle, a novel that won him several awards.
Wow, Prof, this is very interesting. You've also mentioned before that Mtuze's work was part of what inspired you to become a writer yourself. Can you talk about how his writings influenced your path, both creatively and intellectually?
Yeah, most definitely. I've cited Professor Mtuze as one of my major influences. First, as a reader of literature, but Xhosa literature, and as a writer. As you would know, many of us encountered his work as part of the school syllabus from primary school. And, so by the time I was in high school and hearing that actually this Mtuze is someone who exists, because when we encountered books in school, you never really thought that someone sits and write them, it was almost like they've been created, like everything around us is created, you know? So it was for the first time that I knew that this writer is with us here in Makanda in the first instance. And later on, you know, perhaps I should give you a bit of a background in terms of scholarship. The first time I heard someone talking about a professor, Udaba was working, was being called. Actually, someone came to call her back to work as a domestic, and then her response was, "Mcele andizi ndisebenza la professor ngoku." You know, so so that was the ex-employer trying to call her back, and you know, yeah, she was not interested because now she was working for a professor. So from that moment, I wondered, what do professors do? But at that stage, I knew professors only to be abelungu. So by the time I was in high school, later in life, to meet Professor Tuze and find out that actually he is a professor, for me, that was quite inspiring, and to know that you can be a professor just by reading and writing books. So partly that's how I was encouraged to pursue the line of literature, and of course, I loved his work. Yeah.
Wow, Prof, we're not doing justice to this tribute because I'm left with 5 minutes. But I want to ask two questions before we will have to set time aside and call all other authors to do a proper tribute to Professor Tuze. What stood out for you about the way Tuze told stories, particularly in isiXhosa? What is the language, the characters, and the themes? And what comes to mind is when you were reflecting on Facebook about one of his poems, Umntu Makatyewe, and I must confess, ndashiyeka phaa kulaa nto ndandiyicinga ngabanye nani ukubana umntu makatyewe. Now xa uyichaza ukuthi no, the deeper meaning kulaa nto ithini, I'm sure nabanye bangafuna ukuqonda ukuthi what was behind esa sihloko sithi umntu makatyewe, Prof.
Yeah, you know, Prof Tuze made literature interesting. He made it lively in the sense that, you know, we grew up being forced to read, but he made you want to read his work. You know, a poem like Umntu Makatyiwe, you know, immediately, even a class in people who were never really into books, but that poem always, without fail, it always interested people. And it's only when you start engaging with the poem that it has a deeper moral message, you know, that as a human being, you need to be productive, you need to be of value to humanity, you need to impact other people in a positive way. And that is a meaning that many did not pick up from that poem, because it's all about, I mean, because of his sexual connotations that often misled us. But this is what you found also in his fiction. The wit and humor that he used, I mean, were one of my favorite works by him. It's a pity I can't read it now, but some other day, you know, I have Amatolindaba here, and the story, one of my favorite stories by him, and by any other short story writer, by the way, is Zilo Zilunguzene. It's a story that I've, you know, used in many different platforms. I think during the lockdown, for instance, in 2020, I used to read. I started with this book, where I was reading extracts from some of the works that inspire me, and Amatolindaba is one of those works.
Wow, Prof, as we conclude this short interview, would you say his work has received the kind of recognition and institutional support it deserves, both during his lifetime and now that he has passed?
Well, most certainly during the time I was at school. Unfortunately, much as I think I'm one of very few scholars who have studied both literature in isiXhosa and literature in English. But right now I'm pursuing the English side because my PhD is in English. But most certainly, when I grew up and when I was at university as an undergraduate, his work was readily available. His work was accessed easily. I cannot say now, I'm not an authority, but what I know for sure is that a lot more can be done to celebrate his work. 2 years ago, we marked 200 years of isiXhosa as a written language. And Professor Mtuze is one of the main contributors to that literature. So I think we have to remember that he remains one of the most prolific writers, particularly the isiXhosa, in the history of the language.
Wow, a powerful reflection indeed. Professor Siphiwo Mahala, thank you very much for your time, your insights, and your heartfelt tribute. As we bid farewell to Professor Peter Mtuze, may his pen continue to speak through the generations. He wrote not just in isiXhosa, but into the very soul of our nation. And of course, siza kumkhumbula. Siyabulela kakhulu njengalwazi Mahala. Okay, all right, thank you very much. Time check now, it is exactly 17 minutes after 2. We're coming back to the invasion. Sibulele kakhulu ke kube besibukele nabebesimamele, sibuyele ke kwi-invasion no Lady P.
Here comes Radio according to you. Join our online community on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Keeping SC Radio. The perfect dose of local and international sound.